What are some examples of user-generated content on the World Wide Web?
Blogs, short for weblogs, are akin to modern-day diaries or logs of thoughts and activities of the author. In the late 1990s, software became available to create blogs using templates, therefore making them accessible to a wide audience as a publishing tool. Blogs may be created by single individuals or by groups of contributors. Blog entries are organized in reverse chronological order with the most recent entries being seen first. Entries may include text, audio, images, video, and links to other sites. Blog authors may invite reader feedback via comments, which allows for dialogue between blog authors and readers. However, once posted, blog entries may not be edited. Wikis, from the Hawaiian word wiki, which means fast, are web pages that allow users to add and edit material in a collaborative fashion. The first wikis were developed in the mid-1990s by Ward Cunningham, 1949, as a way for users to quickly add content to web pages. The advantage of this software was that the users did not need to know complicated languages to add material to the web. One of the best-known wikis is Wikipedia, an online, collaborative encyclopedia. Although entries to Wikipedia need to come from published sources and be based on fact, rather than the writer's opinion, there is no overall editorial authority on the site. Podcasts are broadcast media that may be created by anyone and are available on demand. Unlike traditional broadcast media, radio and television, podcasts are easily created with a microphone, video camera, computer, and connection to the web. Podcasting does not require sophisticated recording or transmitting equipment. Most podcasts are broadcast on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly schedule, while traditional broadcast media follow a set schedule. Podcasts may be downloaded onto a computer or a portable device such as a MP3 player and listened to whenever it is convenient.
Who is generally regarded as the founder of quantum mechanics?
The German mathematical physicist Werner Karl Heisenberg, 1901 to 1976, is regarded as the father of quantum mechanics, the theory of small-scale physical phenomena. His theory of uncertainty in 1927 overturned traditional classical mechanics and electromagnetic theory regarding energy and motion when applied to subatomic particles such as electrons and parts of atomic nuclei. The theory states that while it is impossible to specify precisely both the position and the simultaneous momentum, mass 3 velocity, of a particle, they can only be predicted. This means that the result of an action can be expressed only in terms of probability that a certain effect will occur. Heisenberg was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1932.
What are the general characteristics of a plant?
A plant is a multicellular, eukaryotic organism with cellulose-rich cell walls and chloroplasts, which has starch as the primary carbohydrate food reserve. Plants are primarily terrestrial, autotrophic, capable of making their own food. Organisms. Most plants contain chlorophylls A and B and xanthophylls, yellow pigments, as well as carotenes, orange pigments.
What is good and bad cholesterol?
Chemically a lipid, cholesterol is an important constituent of body cells. This fatty substance, produced mostly in the liver, is involved in bile salt and hormone formation, and in the transport of fats in the bloodstream to the tissues throughout the body. Both cholesterol and fats are transported as lipoproteins, units having a core of cholesterol and fats in varying proportions with an outer wrapping of carrier protein phospholoids and apoproteins. An overabundance of cholesterol in the bloodstream can be an inherited trait. Can be triggered by dietary intake, or can be the result of a metabolic disease, such as diabetes mellitus. Fats, from meat, oil, and dairy products, strongly affect the cholesterol level. High cholesterol levels in the blood may lead to a narrowing of the inner lining of the coronary arteries from the buildup of a fatty tissue called atheroma. This increases the risk of coronary heart disease or stroke. However, if most cholesterol in the blood is in the form of high-density lipoproteins, HDL, then it seems to protect against arterial disease. HDL picks up cholesterol in the arteries and brings it back to the liver for excretion or reprocessing.
Which scientific disciplines study the human body?
The scientific disciplines of anatomy and physiology study the human body. Anatomy, from the Greek ana and temnein, meaning to cut up, is the study of the structure of the body parts, including their form and organization. Physiology, from the Latin, meaning the study of nature, is the study of the function of the various body parts and organs. Anatomy and physiology are usually studied together to achieve a complete understanding of the human body.
What material was used in the U.S. flag planted on the Moon by astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin Jr.?
The astronauts erected a 3 by 5 foot, 0.9 by 1.5 meter, nylon U.S. flag, its top edge braced by a spring wire to keep it extended.
What is a yazoo?
A yazoo is a tributary of a river that runs parallel to the river, being prevented from joining the river because the river has built up high banks. The name is derived from the Yazoo River, a tributary of the Mississippi River, which demonstrates this effect.
What was the first National Physics Society organized in the United States?
The first National Physics Society in the United States was the American Physical Society, organized on May 20, 1899, at Columbia University in New York City. The first president was physicist Henry Augustus Rowland, 1848 to 1901.
How do polarized sunglasses reduce glare?
Sunlight reflected from the horizontal surface of water, glass, and snow is partially polarized, with the direction of polarization chiefly in the horizontal plane. Such reflected light may be so intense as to cause glare. Polarized sunglasses contain filters that block, absorb light that is polarized in a direction perpendicular to the transmission axis. The transmission axes of the lenses of polarized sunglasses are oriented vertically.
What are the liquid fuels used by the space shuttles?
Liquid hydrogen is used as a fuel, with liquid oxygen used to burn it. These two fuels are stored in chambers separately and then mixed to combust the two. Because oxygen must be kept below -183 degrees Celsius to remain a liquid, and hydrogen must be at -253 degrees Celsius to remain a liquid, they are both difficult to handle, but make useful rocket fuel.
Are there any unsolved problems in mathematics?
The earliest challenges and contests to solve important problems in mathematics date back to the 16th and 17th centuries. Some of these problems have continued to challenge mathematicians until modern times. For example, Pierre de Fermat, 1601 to 1665, issued a set of mathematical challenges in 1657. Many on prime numbers and divisibility. The solution to what is now known as Fermat's last theorem was not established until the late 1990s by Andrew Wiles, 1953. David Hilbert, 1862-1943, a German mathematician, identified 23 unsolved problems in 1900 with the hope that these problems would be solved in the 21st century. Although some of the problems were solved, others remain unsolved to this day. More recently, in 2000 the Clay Mathematics Institute named 7 mathematical problems that had not been solved with the hope that they could be solved in the 21st century. A $1 million prize will be awarded for solving each of these 7 problems.
What is the Christmas factor?
In the clotting of blood, factor 9, or the Christmas factor, is a coagulation factor present in normal plasma, but deficient in the blood of persons with hemophilia B or Christmas disease. It was named after a man named Christmas who, in 1952, was the first patient in whom this genetic disease was shown to be distinct from hemophilia. Another genetic blood clotting disease in which the blood does not have factor VIII.
How hot is the sun?
The center of the sun is about 27 million degrees Fahrenheit, 15 million degrees Celsius. The surface, or photosphere, of the sun is about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 5,500 degrees Celsius. Magnetic anomalies in the photosphere cause cooler regions that appear to be darker than the surrounding surface. These sunspots are about 6,700 degrees Fahrenheit, 4,000 degrees Celsius. The sun's layer of lower atmosphere, the chromosphere, is only a few thousand miles thick. At the base, the chromosphere is about 7,800 degrees Fahrenheit, 4,300 degrees Celsius, but its temperature rises with altitude to the corona. The sun's outer layer of atmosphere, which has a temperature of about 1,800,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 million degrees Celsius.
What state was first to create mandatory deposits on beverage containers?
In 1971, the state of Oregon was the first to create legislation mandating deposits on beverage containers. The deposit was 5 cents per container.
What is a hoodoo?
A hoodoo is a fanciful name for a grotesque rock pinnacle or pedestal, usually of sandstone, that is the result of weathering in a semi-arid region. An outstanding example of a hoodoo occurs in the Wasatch Formation at Bryce Canyon, Utah.
What is an astrolabe?
Invented by the Greeks or Alexandrians around 100 B. CE, an astrolabe is a two-dimensional working model of the heavens, with sites for observations. It consists of 2 concentric, flat disks, one fixed, representing the observer on Earth, the other moving, which can be rotated to represent the appearance of the celestial sphere at a given moment. Given latitude, date, and time, the observer can read off the altitude and azimuth of the sun, the brightest stars, and the planets. By measuring the altitude of a particular body, One can find the time. The astrolabe can also be used to find times of sunrise, sunset, twilight, or the height of a tower or depth of a well. After 1600, it was replaced by the sextant and other more accurate instruments.
What are the parts of a flower?
Sepal found on the outside of the bud or on the underside of the open flower. It serves to protect the flower bud from drying out. Some sepals ward off predators by their spines or chemicals. Petals serve to attract pollinators and are usually dropped shortly after pollination occurs. Nectar contains varying amounts of sugar and proteins that can be secreted by any of the floral organs. It usually collects inside the flower cup near the base of the cup formed by the flower parts. Stamen is the male part of a flower and consists of a filament and anther where pollen is produced. Pistil is the female part, which consists of the stigma, style, and ovary containing ovules. After fertilization, the ovules mature into seeds.
What features of reptiles enabled them to become true land vertebrates?
Legs were arranged to support the body's weight more effectively than in amphibians, allowing reptile bodies to be larger and to run. Reptilian lungs were more developed with a greatly increased surface area for gas exchange than the sac-like lungs of amphibians. The three-chambered heart of reptiles was more efficient than the three-chambered amphibian heart. In addition, the skin was covered with hard, dry scales to minimize water loss. However, the most important evolutionary adaptation was the amniotic egg, in which an embryo could survive and develop on land. The eggs were surrounded by a protective shell that prevented the developing embryo from drying out.
When was Google founded?
In 1996, Stanford University graduate student Larry Page, 1973. And Sergey Brin, 1973, began collaborating on a search engine called Backrub. Backrub operated on the Stanford servers for more than a year until it began to take up too much bandwidth. In 1997, Page and Brin decided they needed a new name for the search engine and decided upon Google as a play on the mathematical term Google. A Google is the numeral 1 followed by 100 zeros. Their goal was to organize the seemingly infinite amount of information on the web. Google first incorporated as a company in September 1998 and the corporation went public in 2004.
What is the normal pH of blood?
The normal pH of arterial blood is 7.4 while the pH of venous blood is about 7.35 Arterial blood has a slightly higher pH because it has less carbon dioxide.
What is the largest vein in the human body?
The largest vein in the human body is the inferior vena cava. The vein that returns blood from the lower half of the body back to the heart.
How does a stalactite differ from a stalagmite?
A stalactite is a conical or cylindrical calcite formation hanging from a cave roof. It forms from the centuries-long buildup of mineral deposits resulting from the seepage of water from the limestone rock above the cave. This water containing calcium bicarbonate evaporates, losing some carbon dioxide, to deposit small quantities of calcium carbonate. CaCO3, carbonate of lime, which eventually forms a stalactite. A stalagmite is a stone formation that develops upward from the cave floor and resembles an icicle upside down. Formed from water containing calcite that drips from the limestone walls and roof of the cave. It sometimes joins a stalactite to form a column.
What is loco weed?
The leguminous loco weeds or milk vetches, genera Astragalus and Oxytropes, have been a severe problem for ranchers in the western half of the United States and are considered to be some of the most toxic plants for horses, sheep, goats, and cattle. Loco is the Spanish word for crazy and refers to the staggering and trembling behavior of poisoned animals who walk into things and react to unseen objects. The poisonous compounds are an unusual group of alkaloids that affect certain cells of the central nervous system, explaining the behavioral changes observed.
How much does human hair grow in a year?
Each hair grows about 9 inches, 23 centimeters, every year.
How are chromosomes assembled?
Chromosomes are assembled on a scaffold of proteins, called hist-1s, that allow DNA to be tightly packed. There are 5 major types of hist-1s, all of which have a positive charge. The positive charges of the hist-1s attract the negative charges on the phosphates of DNA, thus holding the DNA in contact with the hist-1s. These thicker strands of DNA and proteins are called chromatin. Chromatin is then packed to form the familiar structure of a chromosome. During mitosis, chromosomes acquire characteristic shapes that allow them to be counted and identified.
What are some beneficial insects?
Beneficial insects include bees, wasps, flies, butterflies, moths, and others that pollinate plants. Many fruits and vegetables depend on insect pollinators for the production of seeds. Insects are an important source of food for birds, fish, and many animals. In some countries, such insects as termites, caterpillars, ants, and bees are eaten as food by people. Products derived from insects include honey and beeswax, shellac, and silk. Some predators such as mantises, ladybugs, or lady beetles, and lacewings feed on other harmful insects. Other helpful insects are parasites that live on or in the body of harmful insects. For example, some wasps lay their eggs in caterpillars that damage tomato plants.
How are bacteria cultured?
Bacteria are usually cultured in petri dishes that contain a culture medium, usually nutrient agar. Petri dishes were developed in 1887 by Julius Richard Petrie, 1852 to 1921. A member of Robert Koch's laboratory. The top of the dish is larger than the bottom so that when the dish is closed a strong seal is created, preventing contamination of the culture. Agar was developed as a culture media for bacteria by Robert Koch. Koch was interested in the isolation of bacteria in pure culture. Because isolation was difficult in liquid media, he began to study ways in which bacteria could be grown on solid media. After sterile, boiled potatoes proved unsatisfactory, a better alternative was suggested by Fanny E. Hesse, 1850 to 1934, the wife of Walther Hesse, 1846 to 1911, who was one of Koch's assistants. She suggested that agar, which she had used to thicken sauces, jams, and jellies, be used to solidify liquid nutrient broth. Agar is generally inexpensive and, once gelled, does not melt until reaching a temperature of 212 degrees Fahrenheit 100 degrees Celsius. If 1 to 2 grams of agar are added to 100 milliliter of nutrient broth, it produces a solid medium that is not degraded by most bacteria. Stacks of petri dishes culturing bacteria are one of the most common items in a microbiology laboratory.
How is patient-controlled analgesia, PCA, administered?
This is a drug delivery system that dispenses a preset intravenous, 4 dose of a narcotic analgesic for reduction of pain whenever a patient pushes a switch on an electric cord. The device consists of a computerized pump with a chamber containing a syringe holding up to 60 milliliters of a drug. The patient administers a dose of narcotic when the need for pain relief arises. A lockout interval device automatically inactivates the system if the patient tries to increase the amount of narcotic within a preset time period.
What is a genome?
A genome is the complete set of genes inherited from one's parents. Genome sizes vary from one species to another. The final number for humans is yet to be determined.
How does an independent variable differ from a dependent variable?
An independent variable is manipulated and controlled by the researcher. A dependent variable is the variable that the researcher watches and/or measures. It is called a dependent variable because it depends upon and is affected by the independent variable. For example, a researcher may investigate the effect of sunlight on plant growth by exposing some plants to 8 hours of sunlight per day and others to only 4 hours of sunlight per day. The plant growth rate is dependent upon the amount of sunlight, which is controlled by the researcher.
What is the most famous volcano?
The eruption of Mt. Vesuvius in Italy on August 79 CE is perhaps the most famous historical volcanic eruption. Vesuvius had been dormant for generations. When it erupted, entire cities were destroyed, including Pompeii, Stabia, and Herculaneum. Pompeii and Stabia were buried under ashes while Herculaneum was buried under a mud flow.
What is a light year?
A light year is a measure of distance, not time. It is the distance that light, which travels in a vacuum at the rate of 186,282 miles. 299,792 kilometers per second, can travel in a year, 365.25 days. This is equal to 5.87 trillion miles, 9.46 trillion kilometers.
What are the major developmental milestones during infancy?
A normal infant will double his or her birth weight by 5 or 6 months of age and triple his or her birth weight during the first year of life. Major developmental milestones during infancy are summarized in the table below. There is considerable variation between individuals, but these are within the normal range.
How can the entire genome fit into the nucleus of a cell?
The average nucleus has a diameter of less than 5 micrometers. And the DNA, eukaryotic, has a length of 1 to 2 micrometers. In order to fit DNA into a nucleus, DNA and proteins are tightly packed to form threads called chromatin. These threads are so thick that they actually become visible with a light microscope.
How much water does the average family in the United States use per day?
The average family in the United States uses 69.3 gallons, 262 liters, of water per day. This includes showers, toilets, faucets, dishwashing, clothes washing, faucets, and other uses.
When does 0 × 0 = 1?
Factorials are the product of a given number and all the factors less than that number. The notation n is used to express this idea. For example, 5 factorial is 5x 4x 3x 2x 1 equals 120. For completeness, 0 is assigned the value 1, so 0x 0 equals 1.
What are the various layers of the skin?
Skin is a tissue membrane that consists of layers of epithelial and connective tissues. The outer layer of the skin's epithelial tissue is the epidermis and the inner layer of connective tissue is the dermis. The epidermis layer is replaced continually as new cells, produced in the stratum basale, mature, and are pushed to the surface by the newer cells beneath. The entire epidermis is replaced in about 27 days. The dermis, the lower layer, contains nerve endings, sweat glands, hair follicles, and blood vessels. The upper portion of the dermis has small, finger-like projections called papillae, which extend into the upper layer. The patterns of ridges and grooves visible on the skin of the soles, palms, and fingertips are formed from the tops of the dermal papillae.
Why is the number 10 considered important?
One reason is that the metric system is based on the number 10. The metric system emerged in the late 18th century out of a need to bring standardization to measurement, which had up to then been fickle, depending upon the preference of the ruler of the day. But 10 was important well before the metric system. Nicomachus of Gerasa, c. 60 c. 120, a 2nd century Neo-Pythagorean from Judea, considered 10 a perfect number. The figure of divinity present in creation with mankind's fingers and toes. Pythagoreans believed 10 to be the firstborn of the numbers, the mother of them all, the one that never wavers and gives the key to all things. Shepherds of West Africa counted sheep in their flocks by colored shells based on 10. And 10 had evolved as a base of most numbering schemes. Some scholars believe the reason 10 developed as a base number had more to do with ease. 10 is easily counted on fingers and the rules of addition. subtraction, multiplication, and division for the number 10 are easily memorized.
When was the first U.S. satellite launched?
Explorer 1, launched January 31, 1958, by the U.S. Army, was the first United States satellite launched into orbit. This 31-pound, 14.06 kilogram, satellite carried instrumentation that led to the discovery of Earth's radiation belts, which would be named after University of Iowa scientist James A. Van Allen. It followed 4 months after the launching of the world's first satellite, the Soviet Union's Sputnik 1. On October 3, 1957, the Soviet Union placed the large 184-pound, 83.5 kilogram, satellite into low Earth orbit. It carried instrumentation to study the density and temperature of the upper atmosphere. And its launch was the event that opened the space age.
Are there any natural predators of gypsy moth caterpillars?
About 45 kinds of birds, squirrels, chipmunks, and white-footed mice eat this cereus. Insect pest. Among the 13 imported natural enemies of the moth, 2 flies, Compus luricinata, a tachnid fly, and Sternia scutellata, parasitize the caterpillar. Other parasites and various wasps have also been tried as controls, as well as spraying and male sterilization.
Who developed the periodic table?
Dmitry Ivanovich Mendeleev, 1834–1907. Was a Russian chemist whose name will always be linked with the development of the periodic table. He was the first chemist to really understand that all elements are related members of a single ordered system. He changed what had been a highly fragmented and speculative branch of chemistry into a true, logical science. His nomination for the 1906 Nobel Prize in Chemistry failed by 1 vote. But his name became recorded in perpetuity 50 years later when element 101 was called Mendelevium. According to Mendeleev, the properties of the elements, as well as those of their compounds, are periodic functions of their atomic weights. In the 1920s, it was discovered that atomic number was the key rather than weight. Mendeleev compiled the first true periodic table in 1869 listing all the 63, then known, elements. In order to make the table work, Mendeleev had to leave gaps. And he predicted that further elements would eventually be discovered to fill them. 3 were discovered in Mendeleev's lifetime: gallium in 1875, scandium in 1879, and germanium in 1896. There are 95 naturally occurring elements. Of the remaining elements, elements 96 to 109, 10 are undisputed. There are approximately more than 50 million chemical compounds produced from the elements, registered with chemical abstracts as of 2009.
How much lymph is in the body?
The body contains approximately 1 to 2 quarts, 1 or 2 liters of lymph, which accounts for 1 to 3% of body weight.
What organs are included in the integumentary system?
The integumentary system, from the Latin integere, meaning to cover, includes skin, hair, glands, and nails. The main function of the integumentary system is to provide the body with a protective barrier between the organs inside the body and the changing environment outside.
What causes the sensation of pins and needles when your foot falls asleep?
Local pressure, such as crossing or sitting on your legs, may temporarily compress a nerve, removing sensory and motor function in your foot. When the local pressure is removed, the familiar feeling of pins and needles is felt as the nerve endings become reactivated.
How large is the solar system?
The size of the solar system can be visualized by imagining the Sun, 864,000 miles in diameter. 1,380,000 kilometers, shrunk to a diameter of 1 inch, about the size of a ping-pong ball. Using the same size scale, Earth would be a speck 0.01 inches, 0.25 millimeters in diameter and about 9 feet, 2.7 meters, away from the ping-pong ball-sized Sun. Our Moon would have a diameter of 0.0025 inches, 0.06 millimeters, the thickness of a human hair, and only a little over 1/4 inch, 6.3 millimeters, from Earth. Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, appears as the size of a small pea. 0.1 inches 2.5 millimeters in diameter, and 46 feet, 14 meters, from the Sun.
What is the Big Crunch theory?
According to the Big Crunch theory, at some point in the very distant future, all matter will reverse direction and crunch back into the single point from which it began. Two other theories predict the future of the universe, the Big Bohr theory and the plateau theory. The Big Bohr theory, named because it has nothing exciting to describe, claims that all matter will continue to move away from all other matter and the universe will expand forever. According to the plateau theory, expansion of the universe will slow to the point where it will nearly cease, at which time the universe will reach a plateau and remain essentially the same.
Which disease is the most common?
The most common non-contagious disease is periodontal disease, such as gingivitis or inflammation of the gums. Few people in their lifetime can avoid the effects of tooth decay. The most common contagious disease in the world is coryza or the common cold. There are nearly 62 million cases of the common cold in the United States annually.
Space program and what caused it?
Challenger mission STS-51L was launched on January 28, 1986, but exploded 73 seconds after liftoff. The entire crew of 7 was killed, and the Challenger was completely destroyed. The investigation of the Challenger tragedy was performed by the Rogers Commission, established and named for its chairman, former Secretary of State, William Rogers. The consensus of the Rogers Commission, which studied the accident for several months, and participating investigative agencies was that the accident was caused by a failure in the joint between the two lower segments of the right solid rocket motor. The specific failure was the destruction of the seals that are intended to prevent hot gases from leaking through the joint during the propellant burn of the rocket motor. The evidence assembled by the Commission indicated that no other element of the Space Shuttle system contributed to this failure. Although the Commission did not affix blame to any individuals, the public record made clear that the launch should not have been made that day. The weather was unusually cold at Cape Canaveral, and temperatures had dipped below freezing during the night. Test data had suggested that the seals, called O-rings, around the solid rocket booster joints lost much of their effectiveness in very cold weather.
What is a syzygy?
A syzygy, syzygy, is a configuration that occurs when 3 celestial bodies lie in a straight line, such as the Sun, Earth, and the Moon during a solar or lunar eclipse. The particular syzygy when a planet is on the opposite side of Earth from the Sun is called an opposition.
Which 2 cervical vertebrae allow the head to move?
The first 2 cervical vertebrae, C1 and C2, allow the head to move. The first cervical vertebra, the C1 or atlas, articulates with the occipital bone of the skull and makes it possible for a person to nod his or her head. The second cervical vertebra, C2, known as the axis, forms a pivot point for the atlas to move the skull in a side-to-side rotation.
Which U.S. state produces the most crude oil?
Texas is the largest producer of crude oil in the United States. In 2008, Texas produced 398,000 and 14,000 barrels of oil. Alaska is the second largest producer of crude oil in the United States, producing 874,000 barrels of oil in 2008.
How many people visit a dentist regularly?
Only about half the population visits a dentist as often as once a year. Children, ages 2 to 17, visit the dentist more frequently than adults.
What is the difference between a gene and a chromosome?
The human genome contains 24 distinct, physically separate units called chromosomes. Arranged linearly along the chromosomes are tens of thousands of genes. The term gene refers to a particular part of a DNA molecule defined by a specific sequence of nucleotides. It is the specific sequence of the nitrogen bases that encodes a gene. The human genome contains about 3 billion base pairs, and the length of genes varies widely.
What is the amount of carbon dioxide found in normal blood?
Carbon dioxide normally ranges from 19 to 50 millimeters per liter in arterial blood and 22 to 30 millimeters per liter in venous blood.
Why is sulfuric acid important?
Sometimes called oil of vitriol, or vitriolic acid, sulfuric acid. H2SO4 has become one of the most important of all chemicals. It was little used until it became essential for the manufacture of soda in the 18th century. It is prepared industrially by the reaction of water with sulfur trioxide, which in turn is made by chemical combination of sulfur dioxide and oxygen by one of two processes: the contact process or the chamber process. Many manufactured articles in common use depend in some way on sulfuric acid for their production. 90% of the sulfuric acid manufactured in the United States is used in the production of fertilizers and other inorganic chemicals.
What are the four groups of seedless, vascular plants?
The seedless, vascular plants include ferns of the genus Pterophyta, which is the largest group, the whisk ferns of the genus Xylophyta, the club mosses of the genus Lycophyta, and the horsetails of the genus Arthrophyta.
How long do chemicals from marijuana stay in the body?
Hen marijuana is smoked, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. Its active ingredient is absorbed primarily in the fat tissues. The body transforms the THC into metabolites, which can be detected by urine tests for up to a week. Tests involving radioactively labeled THC have traced the metabolites for up to a month. The retention of labeled THC in humans is about 40% at 3 days and 30% at 1 week. Schedule V low potential for abuse. May contain lometil, parapectilin, small amounts of narcotics. Regulated, charicol, robitussin, in the same manner as non-scheduled prescription drugs.
What are the common cuts of gemstones?
Modern gem cutting uses faceted cutting for most transparent gems. In faceted cutting, numerous facets geometrically disposed to bring out the beauty of light and color to the best advantage are cut. The four most common cuts are the brilliant, the rose, the baguette, and the step or trap cut. The step or trap cut is also known as the emerald cut and is used for emeralds. The brilliant and rose cuts are often used for diamonds.
Which name is now used as a synonym for leprosy?
Hansen's disease is the name of this chronic, systemic infection characterized by progressive lesions. Caused by a bacterium, Mycobacterium leprae, which is transmitted through airborne respiratory droplets. The disease is not highly contagious. Continuous close contact is needed for transmittal. Antimicrobial agents, such as sulfones, dapsone in particular, are used to treat the disease.
How fast can a crocodile run on land?
In smaller crocodiles, the running gait can change into a bounding gallop that can achieve speeds of 2 to 10 miles, 3 to 17 kilometers per hour.
How long does it take the average spider to weave a complete web?
The average orb weaver spider takes 30 to 60 minutes to completely spin its web. These species of spiders, Order Aranii, use silk to capture their food in a variety of ways. Ranging from the simple tripwires used by large bird-eating spiders to the complicated and beautiful webs spun by orb spiders. Some species produce funnel-shaped webs, and other communities of spiders build communal webs. A completed web features several spokes leading from the initial structure. The number and nature of the spokes depend on the species. The spider replaces any damaged threads by gathering up the thread in front of it and producing a new one behind it. The orb web must be replaced every few days because it loses its stickiness and its ability to entrap food.
Who was Alfred Russel Wallace?
Alfred Russel Wallace, 1823 to 1913, was a naturalist whose work was presented with Charles Darwin's at the Linnean Society of London in 1858. After extensive travels in the Amazon basin, Wallace independently came to the same conclusions as Darwin on the significance of natural selection in driving the diversification of species. Wallace also worked as a natural history specimen collector in Indonesia. Wallace, like Darwin, also read the work of Thomas Malthus, 1766 to 1834. During an attack of malaria in Indonesia, Wallace made the connection between the Malthusian concept of the struggle for existence and a mechanism for change within populations. From this, Wallace wrote the essay that was eventually presented with Darwin's work in 1858.
What is a concussion?
A concussion is an injury to the brain caused by a blow or jolt to the head that disrupts the normal functioning of the brain. Concussions are usually not life-threatening. Since the brain is very complex, there is great variation in the signs and symptoms of a concussion. Some people lose consciousness, others never lose consciousness. Some symptoms may appear immediately, while others do not appear for several days or even weeks.
Since it often occurs during what are fulgurites?
Fulgurites, from the Latin word fulgur, meaning lightning, are petrified lightning, created when lightning strikes an area of dry sand. The intense heat of the lightning melts the sand surrounding the stroke into a rough, glassy tube forming a fused record of its path. These tubes may be 0.5 to 2 inches, 1.5 to 5 centimeters in diameter, and up to 10 feet, 3 meters, in length. They are extremely brittle and break easily. The inside walls of the tube are glassy and lustrous while the outside is rough, with sand particles adhering to it. Fulgurites are usually tan or black in color, but translucent white ones also have been found. Thunderstorms, the electrical source may be lightning. Another description refers to this phenomenon as weak static. Electricity formed when an electrified cloud touches a high exposed point. Molecules of gas in the air around this point become ionized and glow. The name originated with sailors who were among the first to witness the display of spear-like or tufted flames on the tops of their ships' masts. Saint Elmo, which is a corruption of Saint Ermo, is the patron saint of sailors, so they named the fire after him.
How large is a Google?
A Google is 10,100, the number 1 followed by 100 zeros. Unlike most other names for numbers, it does not relate to any other numbering scale. The American mathematician Edward Kastner, 1878 to 1955, first used the term in 1938, when searching for a term for this large number. Kastner asked his nephew, Milton Serrata, 1911 to 1981, then about 9 years old, to suggest a name. The Googolplex is 10 followed by a Google of zeros, represented as 10 Google. The popular web search engine Google.com is named after the concept of a Google.
Where is the spinal cord located?
The spinal cord lies inside the vertebral column. It extends from the occipital bone of the skull to the level of the first or second lumbar vertebra. In adults, the spinal cord is 16 to 18 inches. 42 to 45 centimeters, long and 0.5 inches, 1.27 centimeters, in diameter. The spinal cord is the connecting link between the brain and the rest of the body. It is the site for integration of the spinal cord reflexes.
What is stibnite?
Stibnite is a lead gray mineral, Sb2S3, with a metallic luster. It is the most important ore of antimony, and is also known as antimony glance. One of the few minerals that fuse easily in a match flame, 977 degrees Fahrenheit or 525 degrees Celsius. Stibnite has a hardness of 2 on the Mohs scale and a specific gravity of 4.5 to 4.6. It is commonly found in hydrothermal veins or hot springs deposits. Stibnite is mined in Germany, Romania, France, Bolivia, Peru, and Mexico. The Yellow Pine Mine at Stibnite, Idaho, is the largest producer in the United States. But California and Nevada also have deposits.
What is genetic engineering?
Genetic engineering, also known popularly as molecular cloning or gene cloning, is the artificial recombination of nucleic acid molecules in the test tube, their insertion into a virus, bacterial plasmid, or other vector system, and the subsequent incorporation of the chimeric molecules into a host organism in which they are capable of continued propagation. The construction of such molecules has also been termed gene manipulation because it usually involves the production of novel genetic combinations by biochemical means. Genetic engineering techniques include cell fusion and the use of recombinant DNA, RNA, or gene splicing. In cell fusion, the tough outer membranes of sperm and egg cells are stripped off by enzymes. And then the fragile cells are mixed and combined with the aid of chemicals or viruses. The result may be the creation of a new life form from two species. Recombinant DNA techniques transfer a specific genetic activity from one organism to the next through the use of bacterial plasmids. Small circular pieces of DNA lying outside the main bacterial chromosome. And enzymes, such as restriction endonucleases, which cut the DNA strands, reverse transcriptase, which makes a DNA strand from an RNA strand, DNA ligase, which joins DNA strands together, and tag polymerase, which can make a double-stranded DNA molecule from a single-stranded primer molecule. The process begins with the isolation of suitable DNA strands and fragmenting them. After these fragments are combined with vectors, they are carried into bacterial cells where the DNA fragments are spliced onto plasmid DNA that has been opened up. These hybrid plasmids are now mixed with host cells to form transformed cells. Since only some of the transformed cells will exhibit the desired characteristic or gene activity, the transformed cells are separated and grown individually in cultures. This methodology has been successful in producing large quantities of hormones, such as insulin, for the biotechnology industry. However, it is more difficult to transform animal and plant cells. Yet the technique exists to make plants resistant to diseases and to make animals grow larger. Because genetic engineering interferes with the processes of heredity and can alter the genetic structure of our own species, there is much concern over the ethical ramifications of such power, as well as the possible health and ecological consequences of the creation of these bacterial forms. Some applications of genetic engineering in the various fields are listed below. Agriculture: crops having larger yields, disease and drought resistancy. Bacterial sprays to prevent crop damage from freezing temperatures, and livestock improvement through changes in animal traits. Industry: use of bacteria to convert old newspaper and wood chips into sugar. Oil and toxin-absorbing bacteria for oil spill or toxic waste cleanups, and yeasts to accelerate wine fermentation. Medicine: alteration of human genes to eliminate disease, experimental stage. Faster and more economical production of vital human substances to alleviate deficiency and disease symptoms, but not to cure them, such as insulin, interferon. Cancer therapy, vitamins, human growth hormone ADA, antibodies, vaccines, and antibiotics. Research modification of gene structure in medical research, especially cancer research. Food processing renin, enzyme, in cheese aging.